Good evening, and welcome to this Friday's edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name's Tom Luongo. I hope everybody's had a good couple of days. I don't have a show prep tonight, so don't be alarmed. I'm sure you guys will tell me exactly what it is you want me to talk about. So let's get right to it. Oh God, I forgot to set the chat up. Freeman did on for just a second. Oh. That's why. Talk to me, people. Tell me if you're out there. All right, so let's get started. I hope that the chats are actually coming through. The 5 o'clock deep state distraction. Which was what? Manafort going to jail? Can you guys hear me? Hoover Dam. What's up with Hoover Dam? I've been watching the Uruguay-Egypt match for the last hour and a half or so. Well, literally the last hour and a half, because that's about how long a soccer match lasts. I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I do watch the World Cup. And since I am kind of a semi-professional sports blogger, or I used to be, and I can tell you that the World Cup is worth watching. So, what a game today. Anybody that says soccer is boring should be made to watch Spain play Portugal. I have not had a chance to watch the Spain and Portugal because I'm going to download the games off the Pirate Bay and I'm going to watch them in the replay. But I did see that it was like 3-3 and Portugal tied it up in the 88th minute, and that's just fantastic. So, great. So, looking forward to that. Egypt Uruguay was frustrating to watch. The Russian Saudi Arabian match was just funny. I don't know if you guys watched that or not. I know that Russia won 5-0, and that's on its own 5-0 in a World Cup match is always funny. But no, what was really funny was that every time the Russians scored, I was watching. There's a guy that gets the Croatian coverage and uploads them to YouTube to the Pirate Bay, and you can download them. They're about 4 gig. I'm sitting watching them on my TV, and every time the Russians scored, he was in the box. He was in the president's box with MBS, and every time it was like they score, they're like Putin's like, oh, it was really funny, is what it was. Especially because it was like 2-0, and then for most of the game, and then it just went downhill quick. And Uruguay and Egypt. Egypt was obviously playing for a tie in the because Uruguay is the strong one in that group, and it's most likely to come out of that group. You know, the big question is who's going to be the second country to come out of that group, and it really should be between Egypt and Russia. The Saudi Arabians might not get a shot on goal in the entire tournament, so they were pretty bad on the back. And their strikers are fine, but their back end is terrible. I mean, I'm no soccer aficionado, but I am a hockey guy, and you know, to me, soccer is slow hockey on grass that every once in a while is punctuated with real excitement. And when it's exciting, it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate the technical aspect of soccer. I appreciate how the game is played, and I was really impressed with how Egypt ran the left wing lock this afternoon. That was great. Yeah, it was interesting watching Egypt play against a far more skilled team than in Uruguay. They played with a lot of heart. And I enjoyed it. So, I'm not shuddering. I don't want to get back. I actually didn't really want to talk geopolitics tonight. So if you don't really want to, I don't know what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about whatever you guys really want me to talk about, but I do want to talk about the World Cup a little bit because I think it's an important part of the story here. Because the World Cup is as much as we don't want it to be a political event. It is a political event. Good evening, Populous TV. How are you? And every once in a while, I need to cast a slightly wider net. So, hey, if people who are coming here to want to talk about the World Cup a little bit, we should do so, and we should enjoy it. Because it really is somewhat of geopolitics. But it was interesting watching the complete contrast in styles. It was obvious that Uruguay was trying to break an Egypt 9-deep defense, trying to, just standing at the top of the box with 9 guys saying, I dare you to get through us. They were certainly getting very, good evening, Lee. How are you? So you're Populous TV. Awesome. We have royalty in the house on YouTube tonight. Lee Stranahan's actually watching. This is fantastic. So RB Tools. So not to go there, but do you think the Ukrainians will try to take a piss in Moscow's punch bowl? Just so you know, I am simulcasting on both Periscope and YouTube, so I'm going to repeat people's questions back and forth tonight as we do this. Yeah, I do expect something to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen during the World Cup or afterwards. Anything is possible. I expect something to happen. There's been too much smoke. There's been too many little provocations in like the Sea of Azov and along the contact line in the Donbass, especially in Lugansk. It just looks like, they may be going after, I think it's Gorlovka. That may be the line of attack, because remember that it was right after the Sochi Olympics that we staged the coup in the Maidan. We staged the coup in Ukraine. Russia had just come off a very successful Winter Olympics and showed the world that, they're a modern society and a modern country, and that didn't play well with the whole concept of Russia being the big bad guy. And I'm sorry, DTF. I think you honestly aren't. I think you're honestly wrong about that. If something happened, expect the media to blame it on North Korea. That's an interesting thought, Lee. I would have never put it that way. I would have. That would be interesting. I don't know though. I mean, it would be really hard not. I think what we're really trying to do is we're trying to ensure that if there's at the end of the month, I think it's the end of the month, right? That the Russian sanctions are due to be extended by the EU. We've got the Italians are out there saying they should be destroyed. We've got now Seehofer, Sebastian Kurz, and Salvini all talking about wanting to curb immigration, and everybody's really on board with. If you talk to any rational politician in Europe, they all want the sanctions lifted. Now, the big thing is, if there's enough goodwill that comes out of the World Cup, and this is where I think you're wrong, DTF, then what we're looking at is an opportunity at the World Cup to take the goodwill that's generated from the World Cup and use that as a springboard optically to allow the sanctions to end. No, not the soccer game. The event itself is a geopolitical event, because it has a huge bearing on actual politics itself. And it's always used as a political football. They've been trying to use it as a political football for 3 months leading up to this. I mean, the May government tried to use it as a way to... all the sporting events have always been used politically. Really? Think I've lost my mind? You don't remember Jimmy Carter boycotting the 1980 Olympics. You don't remember us boycotting Olympics in the past? I mean, what are you talking about? Right. Whatever. I think Lee's got the right point. This is what I'm really trying to talk about here. Is that at the end of the day, you cannot have. It did have absolutely had everything to do with politics. Russia invaded Afghanistan, and he used it as a means to get back at the Soviet Union. Are you kidding me? Totally political. But I'm not going to sit here and argue about that. You can rant all you want about it. You're wrong. Or you can have your opinion on it. I think you're wrong. So we're gonna so it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because Merkel has an opportunity here to allow the Italians to lead the charge to say, okay, we're gonna sunset these sanctions because it's the right thing to do. While at the same time, Merkel then gets to kind of be dragged along with this. I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's a very high probability. I think the most likely thing is that sanctions relief is going to be used as a bargaining tool. But with everything that's happening in Germany now, with Seehofer looking to jump ship on Merkel over immigration, right? He's put forth a plan that she freaking hates, and is almost daring her to fire him as interior minister, because the CSU may lose their majority in Bavaria. That's part of what's going on here. So we've got that happening. You've got AfD came out today and called out Merkel directly, saying, she needs to be gotten rid of. I mean, we're getting very close to the point here where there could be a no confidence vote against Angela Merkel, 3 months after they put a coalition together. And she's going to try and hold together the line that the sanctions should be held in place because that's what the freaking globalists still want. When Trump went into the G7 and look, Crimea is Crimea. They're Russian. We all know they're Russian. What are we talking about here? It's silly. So, now it's not politically great for him, but he doesn't have great optics domestically for this yet. But come on, we know what's happening here. So slowly but surely, there's a war of attrition that Trump is playing against the Democrats on the Russia collusion angle, and there's a war of attrition that the Chinese and the Russians are playing against everything else. That the Russians and Chinese are playing a war of attrition against the United States financially in order to run out the clock on sanctions policy and everything else, which is what I've been saying for months now. Look at the way the Koreans use the Olympics to engage in détente. Sports are a powerful political statement. They always have been. I just really think you're way off base on this. So. Merkel is awful, but who follows her, and will she be any better? Well, that's the really interesting part. I know somebody else asked me that question earlier, I think on one of my blog posts. And 86% of Germans want to be tougher on the migrant crisis. I agree. So now here's the big question now. But RB Tools has got the right questions. What comes next? Well, what comes next is you've got 5 parties that don't have, in Germany, or 6 parties, and none of them can get more than 20% of the vote. How in the hell are you supposed to put a government together? It's like Spain, right? Spain at this point has 3 or 4 parties that all get about 22% of the vote, 18 to 22%. Same thing. It's even worse now in Germany. The SPD's support has collapsed. The CSU never gets more than about 8 to 9% because they're really a Bavarian regional party. The CDU is collapsing. Unless they get rid of Merkel, then they could possibly grab, stabilize their support. And I don't know at that point. And then the leader of the SPD, Andrea Nellis, I think that's her name, Andrea or Angela, I think it's Andrea. She's a hard ass looking to rebuild the SPD and take over back at the end of this term. So, yeah, sports are absolutely mass persuasion. The problem is that it wouldn't be gridlock. It would just continue to be a weak cartel-style government, which can easily be exploited by Brussels and the rest. But the thing is that at the same time, though, it's been a strong German presence that runs the EU. So now, with a weak German coalition, you're seeing the kind of chaos. You're starting to see the kind of chaos that can occur once the center can no longer hold, right? And so this could really get out of control quickly, and it does open up an opportunity to 86 the sanctions. I don't know that it'll happen at the end of this month, though. But if there is a chance, or if let me put it this way, you'll know there's a sincere chance that it could happen if a false flag occurs, because a false flag would need to occur before the end of the month in order to turn public opinion against Russia. Because if some kind of situation happened in the Donbass which forced Putin to militarily intervene across the border into Ukraine officially, which is what we've been trying to provoke him into doing for 4 years now, then that would destroy the goodwill generated by the World Cup. These things always happen around major sporting events. So again, I don't know what DTF's going on about why it's not important. So, I mean, this is the World Cup. I think that's the best way of looking at this, and it certainly invites all of the chaos that I keep talking about. As far as it's going to give the separatists movements that's almost like enough. I don't believe it. And when you look at what happened this week with the ECB on Thursday with Draghi's, not to say that he was hawkish, he was just hawkish relative to what the market, purely because he has to keep interest rates as negative as possible for as long as possible. He says, I'm going to end my QE program. Okay, and so who's going to buy Italian debt? To me, that's simply his way of saying, look, I'm still willing to threaten you Italians if you're not willing to play ball. But at the same time, the Italians have been sitting here they've been very reasonable to say, look, we're not looking to leave the euro. And they're not willing to leave the euro. They want to, actually talk about restructuring the European Union in a way that's sustainable. Not that I agree with that idea, mind you, because I don't agree with that idea. But, they haven't been inflammatory really at all, except on immigration. So immigration is now the point of the day. I'm going to have an article coming out in Strategic Culture on Merkel in, the next couple of days. I turned it in this morning, probably Monday, talking about Merkel. And as we all well know, because we all have talked about this for a long time, that that immigration is a big fundamental issue for people. It's the way these people have framed the immigration issue as it's immoral to turn people away and to destroy your culture, when at the end of the day, what we really want from our government, why we put up with most of its incompetence, remember, hardcore libertarian, is we want them to do the basics of protecting the borders and negotiating treaties and all of that stuff. And immigration is part of that. It's their job to protect, to effectively provide national defense, and immigration is part of national defense. And when you attack people's community bodily, the way they've been attacking, way they've been approaching this immigration issue, it's always going to end in tears. Always. So it's politically, it's always going to end in tears. It's just a bad idea. And I really don't understand the hubris. I mean, I guess I do understand the hubris. I don't understand why they think they can still get away with it after all this time. I mean, I know they're pot committed to the whole process. But I don't understand why why there's at some point you just have to call the bluff and say, okay, we need to back off for a little while. Because truth be told, Merkel needs to back off on immigration, on open immigration. She needs to do so if she wants to stay in power and then live to fight another day. But I don't think she's going to do that. I think she's being told to double down in every way possible. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, what comes next. And yeah, RB Tools, I agree. The Italians ultimately have the financial red button, right? They have, when you owe the bank $1,000, it's your problem. When you owe the bank $1 trillion, it's their problem. And that's the situation today. Anything else? Anybody? What else do you guys want to talk about? So, I mean, I understand people think that there's not a political angle on all of these events, but these sporting events, but there really is. They can be they are absolutely used to try and gain an advantage one way or the other. So, all right. So from that perspective, and you got to remember, it's something else I want to remind people about. I set the agenda here, not you. I don't want to talk about geopolitics. I'll hit the stream off button and go home. If that's not what you guys don't want to hear. If I want to talk about something else, as Maggie tells us all the time, hey, when are we going to have a movie night? You know. So just want to remind you that, you know, I do get the opportunity to set the agenda. And if I don't really want to talk about hardcore geopolitics all the time, especially if I just don't think there's anything new to talk about, then we're just going to ramble on for a bit and, you know, take open questions and talk about a variety of things. And we might talk about, you know, diet or whatever. So Suzanne Johnson on Periscope asked, what happened to gold today? Gold got bombed. The markets got bombed a little bit. Obvious that there was a lot of tape painting today. There was a lot of, we need to get the boys back in the box after Draghi's stink bomb from yesterday, which really sent markets in the wrong directions. So everybody go ahead and block selling, and I will do so later on. Any thoughts on the IG report? If I had any thoughts on the IG report, I would. Yeah, my thought has been from the beginning, if it's not going to lead to indictments, it's like everything else, it's just more kabuki theater. And until we actually see the real report, if you know, if there's multiple versions of this report that's out there, and we've gotten the like the milquetoast version of it, then it's not damning, but it's confirmatory of what we already knew, and it's a good thing, but it's not. I don't know that it's the smoking gun. I don't know that it's the thing that's going to lead to. No, DTF, it's not that I don't want to talk about geopolitics. It's that sometimes I don't want to talk about geopolitics. I do reserve the right to say, this is something I don't want to talk about right now, or I want to talk about this for 5 minutes. And I think I've earned the right to be able to say, that's what I want to do. And if I haven't earned that right with you, you're free to like shut off tonight and wait for the next scope that you're going to enjoy. I don't know what else to tell you. You're being awfully aggro tonight, and I don't see the fucking point. I really don't see the fucking point. If you want to be, you know, look, if you want to be a dick, go ahead. But I don't get it. My channel. I mean, I'm willing to do what you guys want to do, but not 100% of the time. Okay, so what happened to gold today? Gold got bombed. So for those of you who don't know, gold and silver both got bombed a lot. Actually, silver got whacked a lot. And what I found really interesting is, of course, like if you've watched the gold and silver markets for years, like I have, you'll know that when significant moments occur, technically, that were not planned or were not expected, you can always expect that sometime before the end of that week, there's going to be some kind of there's going to be some kind of pullback. Silver breaking above $17 was a wake-up call because it really has been under immense amount of tightening pressure for a while now. For the silver market's been uninteresting for literally a year and a half. Okay? I don't talk about silver because there's nothing to talk about. I'm not going to sit here and pre-position people for a silver bull market that may never occur. Okay? There's still a very good possibility here that silver and gold will not move together in this next effectively, it's an anti-government market, government refutation market. At the end of the day, gold moves higher when faith in government drops. Silver may or may not do so this time around. I mean, that may be news to people, but I'm becoming less and less convinced based on the way silver's been trading that I think that there's anything that there's a 100% probability that silver is going to move along with gold in similar multiples or higher multiples than we have than gold will. And so we got to watch silver very carefully. It's a much thinner market than gold, so it's much more easily manipulated in the moment. The fact that we didn't get a weekly close above $17 this week is kind of significant, but it was done as a tape, what we like to call tape painting, right? Where you're in the days of the ticker tape, you're trying to paint the tape so that it looks that the price movement doesn't look significant. That means you bang the close, you do whatever you have to do. So watching Friday, and today is not the third Friday or is it? Today's 15th. Oh, never mind. Today was options expiration. Sorry, never mind. I'm sorry. Today was the options expiration, and silver was not allowed to close above $17 today because there would have been a lot of people underwater on their options. So silver had to be banged back down below $17 in order to ensure that. And we're not talking futures. We're not talking options on futures because that's the end of the month. Futures contracts and options on futures are a different point. I'm talking about actual straight up just stock options. Today's a third Friday of the month. This is the right, it's the 1st, the 8th, the 15th. So today is it the 4th? No, it's the hell is it? Yeah, I think today was just a witching day. So yeah, thank you, RB Tools and Joanne. It is important every once in a while that we do other things. Sometimes I'm going to want to talk about other stuff. Remember, I come on here, new Star Wars movie comes out, we talk about Star Wars, and guess what? Nobody watches. I don't give a fuck. That's what I want to talk about. Get over it. I try and tie it to the culture. I try and tie it to things that matter and to bigger things. Of course, I always do that. Can't help but. And if the no, it's not that I want to consider that I'm potentially wrong. Nothing to do with that at all. If you don't think that major sporting events are not political or not used for political means, I'm sorry. I just think you're being naive. That's it. It's not. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong because we've got every time either the Russians or the Americans host a major sporting event, there's usually some geopolitical shenanigans going on. Everybody watches out for it. I mean, Theresa May was trying to keep the English from going from. She floated the trial balloon to boycott the World Cup. England boycott the World Cup over the Skripal poisoning. You don't think it's a political event at that point? Whatever, dude. All right. My goats are good. I've only got 4 of them. They're fine. It's the summer. It's raining every day. It's been a really cold summer. I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you that it's been a really cold summer here in North Florida. If we get 90-degree heat, it's mid-June. So if we get 90-degree heat, it doesn't last more than an hour because then thunderclouds come in and drop 3 inches of rain on us. And so we're not getting the kind of insulation that we normally get, solar radiance that we normally get. We're just the cloud cover is just too high. We're seeing, I mean, it's been raining nonstop for over a month now. And this is the hottest part of the year. Well, not the hottest part of the year. The hottest part of the year is August and September. But we're usually by now, like, wanting summer to be over. And it's still 3 more months. And I haven't, and it still feels like spring. I walk outside and it still feels like spring. Wow. Now, it's been almost pleasant. I mean, it's humid as shit, right? You walk outside and you still want to die. But it's been crazy. Yeah, I know, Green Penguin. I know who you are. Yeah, it's been jungle weather. So but this amount of rain at this time of the year is absolutely a measure of much colder summer. Wow, really? Jen Johnson says, she's gotten less than an inch of rain in Phoenix in all of 2018. We got an inch of rain this afternoon. Well, at least it's 30% humidity. If it's 100%, if it's it's 100 degrees and 30% humidity, it's not bad. It's Florida. We get triple 95s. It's awful. It's I have a good friend of mine. He's like, I've been all around the world. It's like, I've done a semester at sea. I've done this. I've been all over the world. I've been to the jungles of Malaysia. I've been to South America. I've been all over the world. And there's no place friggin' hotter than where you live. He's like, I don't want to live anywhere near you. I think. Can you, so RB Tools is asking for a request. You are pretty switched on economic matters. How about sharing knowledge of currency and interest rate policy for those who don't quite get it? Well, okay, so I do, kind of, at least I feel I do. I need things to be a little bit more specific than that. Like a more specific question than that. Like, what do you think is happening in, like, for example, I left off yesterday's scope and with an idea, and I'm going to go grab my desktop real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about. So yesterday, I ended yesterday's live stream with a point about the bond markets and the fact that China and the rest and most of the emerging markets, but certainly China, most of foreign central banks have shortened up their maturity profile of what treasuries they hold, right? So the Chinese hold almost like 1.2 trillion. The Chinese hold, as of April, 1,181,900,000,000 or so in U.S. Treasury debt, right? And I know that because I have the latest TIC report, Treasury International Capital report, sitting up there, sitting on my desktop because it just came out today, and Zero Hedge beat me to looking at the report to note that, ooh, look, the Russians sold half their Treasury debt in April. Okay, so first things first, right? Remember that a bond is... So remember the first things first, right? Is that if bond yields are rising, then they're getting sold, right? So the effective yield on a bond goes up when the price of the bond goes down, right? So if people are selling their bonds, that means the yield is going up. And when people are buying bonds, it means that the yield is going down. This is the most important part. That's the first thing to talk about. They the Keynesians and the mixed monetary theory guys that actually run most of the world. And please don't. I'm looking at my phone for a minute because I'm going to pop open the Periscope app so I can get rid of that person. Well, I can't do that unless they followed me. Never mind. I'll do it later. If you follow me, I'm gonna block you. So please, it's not what we're looking for here on the scope. Please go troll somebody else. Because because I don't have a band hammer in front of me anymore because I do this via Restream. So the Keynesians and the mixed monetary theory guys will do everything imaginable to kind of like muddy the waters about what interest rate rises and falling means and all this stuff. Because they always try to tie everything to domestic economic performance, forgetting the fact that there's an entire world out there and an entire world market for this debt. So, and especially something like U.S. Treasury debt, which is the debt that kind of undergirds or forms the foundation for the sovereign debt issuances around the world, right? Because it is the sovereign debt of the world's most dominant trade currency, right? So, and it's the currency, and it's the debt of the country whose currency is most used in corporate debt as well. That's denominated. So the other day when we were talking about yesterday, when we were talking about Germany and we were talking about China, we were talking about what was happening in the world. I mentioned before I left that China for years during the early stages of Bernanke's QE program and the unique monetary policy. That's not the word I'm looking for, but that's the best one that my brain will give me right now. The monetary experiment that Bernanke and Yellen have been running for the last 10 years with QE and all of that. The Chinese very smartly started shortening up the maturity of all that debt that they own. So they own almost $1.2 trillion in U.S. Treasury debt, but they for years, changed their portfolio structure to shorten the term of that portfolio. So they sold all their 30 years, they sold all their 10s, and they bought 5s and 3s and 2s, right? Because the shorter end of the yield curve, the shorter maturity debt is more highly liquid. There's just more of it, and it's traded more openly. So it's easy to sell into that market without materially affecting the price. So on days of real stress in the marketplace, knowing that when you had a situation like we had yesterday with the ECB and emerging markets were under serious pressure yesterday because of what happened after the ECB's policy meeting. The dollar spiked, and that sent emerging market debt of all types and emerging market currencies haywire. They were less trust in not just in the dollar, but in central bank policy, and they wanted to have the ability to be mobile, right? I always say cash gives you options. It gives you strength. Cash makes you brave because cash gives you options. So in a scary market, the best thing to do is to raise extra cash. So as opposed to having, 90% of your investable wealth in stocks and bonds, you cut back to 70%, 5%. Some cash, because in the beginnings of a bear market or in the beginnings of a chaotic or volatile or choppy market, being in cash is always a good idea, because then being in cash gives you the opportunity to say, I don't need to buy anything. I can wait. I'm going to be discriminatory. I'm going to wait for that to go on sale. I like that stock, but I'm going to wait for it to go on. Why the hell should I buy, I don't know. I would never recommend GE to you, but why would I buy GE at 35 when tomorrow it could be 30? If I like it at 35, you'll love it at 30, right? Cash is king. But more importantly, cash makes you brave because cash gives you options. Well, for bond investors, short-term maturity gives you options. Is like cash. The shorter the maturity of the debt you're holding, the closer you are to cash. Because what's cash? It's debt with no maturity date. That's all it is. Right? So the point I made yesterday was that on days of emerging market stress like that, no surprise to me to see in a pure safe haven day. Everything yesterday screamed safe haven. We had gold up, we had silver up, we had the dollar up, we had We had U.S. Treasuries up. We had German bunds were up. UK gilts were up. Stocks were down. No, stocks were up. Yeah, pure safe haven day. One of those days. A weird day where everybody was moving into tangible assets or effectively hard assets. Right? Gold, cash, U.S. Treasuries, U.S. stocks, German bunds. Probably Swiss debt as well, but I didn't look at Swiss debt yesterday. What we call a safe haven trade. Oh my God, cash or cash equivalents. If you can't, and you got to remember that a lot of institutional investors can't just go to 35% cash. They're not allowed. The rules of the fund say you can only own 2% cash or 3% cash. So the best thing they can do is then buy, 30-day treasury debt. Buy some 30-day commercial paper. That kind of 7-day commercial paper, whatever. They can get into that stuff, but they can't buy cash. Right? So they can get short. And that's what causes the yield curve to flatten. That's what causes the yield curve to flatten. Long end of the curve, you guys is right, probably the short end of the curve. So the short end of the curve rises towards the long end of the curve. So 1-year debt, 30-year debt. Now the worry has been for months now that the U.S. Treasury curve has been flattening. Now, never forget this. The Fed has no control over the long end of the yield curve. Has no control over this whatsoever. That's purely investor driven. The Fed controls the short end of the yield curve. Okay? They affect short-term rates. The market owns long-term rates. And so that's very important. So on a day like yesterday, it made sense to me to think that maybe China was in there selling treasuries to help support, to create dollar liquidity for emerging markets, their emerging market trading partners, in kind of like a sympathy trade to help dollar liquidity by selling. You sell treasuries. I'm not really rambling. The point is that yesterday we saw flattening of the yield curve because I think China was in there selling the short end of the yield curve. Central banks in general were selling the long end of the yield curve, the short end of the yield curve, in order to defend their currencies, with China probably leading the way. That was the point. All right. So I know there's a lot to unpack there. I'm not sure if I did it all in order. All right. So watching what's happening, even today, we saw a further flattening of the yield curve today, even on a day where everything was a mess. Again, more of the same. And then yesterday, and then on top of that, we had options expiration today, which then threw the gold and silver markets for a loop. Commodities were whacked as well. Copper was down 8 cents. Oil was down $2.50. Actually, oil got crushed today. I'm not really worried about WTI. Hold on for just a second. Brent crude. Because all I really care about is Brent crude, because that's international. International oil is represented by Brent, and U.S. domestic prices are governed by WTI. And FYI, we're looking at a $9 spread between Brent and WTI. That's freaking wide. Yeah, it looks to me like oil prices are going to continue to come down here. We're going to get a move definitely back to $70 on Brent crude, and we could easily get a move back into the low 60s. Potentially. 70 first, it may bounce off of 70, and then from there, and then we'll see what happens. And we'll see what happens after that. But we could easily see oil in a bearish market for at least the next 3 months. I saw a report this morning that the European Union the European coast has been pretty much ringed with oil vessels storing oil offshore. There's just so much of it out there, and demand just is not staying up with it. Ben asks, who else thinks capitalism is going to fail in our lifetimes? On this scope, nobody. FYI, I know Ben asked that a while back. Capitalism won't fail in our lifetimes, but Marxism certainly is. Whatever happened to the peak oil crowd? Well, they're still out there. And the stalking horse for the globalists, Chris Martenson, is still out there on peak prosperity, telling everybody that energy, that, EROEI is still important. Energy returned over energy invested is still important. And that, global warming is real and that we all need to go to solar. I'm like, and gold. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? There's so much oil in the world, it's not funny. Not funny. We can pull oil out of the ground. We can't pull oil out of the ground for the most part at $10 a barrel anymore. But the Russians can certainly pull it out of the ground for 20. And they're going to pull oil out of the ground for $20 a barrel for the next 100 years. The only thing that will change that dynamic is commercialized cold, fusion, or 0-point energy, or some radical shift. I'm not saying that any of these things are on the horizon or anything. It's some radical shift in energy production, and we may be on the cusp of some of that stuff, but not anytime soon. But not today, and you can't forecast that today. Certainly not in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think we're anywhere close to that in terms of commercial availability. But I may be wrong about that. And if anybody's got good information on that, you're more than welcome to send it to me, and I'll look at it. So then why aren't they what? Jen, I'm sorry, I don't. The comments are so are really late relative to when I get them. So there's a huge delay. Tillman says that we need to eliminate the per state gas rules, meaning what? The amount I think we should be getting rid of all the corn subsidy stuff. And why the Russians are pulling it out at $20 a barrel? What do you mean? They are. Their cost is around $20 a barrel. That's including paying the government their tariff. Russia's so resource rich it's got to drive McCain nuts. Yeah. One national fuel standard. Yeah. I understand that, but at the same time, we also need to have. I don't think that actually. I think we should keep it. I think we should let the oil companies produce the products that, certainly the gasoline, that each individual area needs. You would be surprised. I don't know if you know anything about gasoline production, but dude, it's so it's so well defined. They've got this shit down to. I would say they've got this shit down to a science. They really do. You don't have any idea how well tuned the gas that we get in Florida is different than the gas that you get in Iowa or in New York or anywhere else. It may all say 87 on the side or on the side of the pump, or 89 or whatever, but it's really different. It has to be, because atmospheric conditions make engines run differently. And they really do blend the gasoline differently. And summer versus winter blends are absolutely necessary. Engines run differently in cold weather. And the blend needs to have a higher flash point. It needs to be, there needs to be more C3 as opposed to C5. And I didn't know any of this until I spent like 6 months working for a race oil re-refinery. And I had to get up to speed on the oil industry. Wow. And I'm sitting there reading all these ASTM standards. Is that Buckman? Are you saying you're getting hosed out in California? I don't know why anybody still lives there, but I wouldn't live there. But no offense to the people who live in California. But Jen, they really do. The Russians pull their cost is about $9 a barrel. They sell 85 octane. Wow. They may need to if you're that high. You know, I never really thought about it, but at that level, but at those elevations, you may need to run 85 octane gas because, you know, you may not be able to actually ignite. There might not be enough air to ignite 87 octane well. I mean, seriously. I don't know, but I mean, you know, but physically it makes sense to me. So I threw something up there earlier that you guys did. I don't know if you heard it or not. I want to talk about it again. So in April, Zero Hedge did the work. They already went ahead and did all the work. That the Russians sold nearly $48 billion worth of Treasury bonds in April, which was, by the way, that was the time when we saw the 10-year Treasury bond push above 3%. Things were starting to look a little hairy. Interesting. Random researcher. Hello, bud. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. How do you feel about the sanctions against Korea and the protests in Vietnam and Muslim portions of China? I don't know anything about the Muslim protests in Vietnam and China. How do I feel about the sanctions against Korea? Well, they're effectively getting lifted by everybody else except us. Trump even effectively said okay to that in his presser the other day when he was talking about the situation. And we're going to get to why the Russians sold off treasuries. Not sure I have a good answer, but I'll take a couple of guesses. Yeah, I haven't been following it, man, at all. Germany and Russia and everybody else keep me, awake at night. So, and you and I haven't spoken about it privately. So, which is a hint, by the way. But it's pretty obvious that post-summit, Trump has acquiesced to the idea that the other countries are going to lift their sanctions against South Korea, and that's actually part of what I wrote about this afternoon. And we got the notice from TASS yesterday that Gazprom and South Korea have reopened talks about a pipeline. Ooh, what a shock! I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to collapse from the surprise. I mean, it took them a week? Of course, he's talking about China. But by lifting the official sanctions on North Korea, it now allows for Gazprom to come in and the Russians, which was always part of this deal. And I've said from the beginning that this was always about this deal. That the Russians would be the ones to materially benefit the most by helping to rebuild North Korea and actually drive home the peace process and the reunification process for North and South. Wow. Hasn't China been destroying mosques as a public safety hazard and rebuilding and building re-education camps for Muslims? That's what I've been reading. According to User 13. That's news to me. Again, you guys are talking about stuff that I'm not sure if you've been putting that on Slack, and if you have, I've missed it. No worries. So interesting to see how quickly. Remember, this is the last point I want to make about the Gazprom and the pipeline is this. All nuclear programs have an energy component to them. They're not all about making nuclear bombs, right? And so Gazprom bringing gas in and then most likely building power plants helps to de-stress the entire area and makes it easy for North Korea to comply with not restarting their nuclear program because they're getting the power that they need from they get the power that they need from now Russian natural gas. All right, I've got a couple of questions here that have stacked up, so I got to get back to this. Do you think the EU? Joanne asked why they sold off their treasuries. Well, aside from the fact that they most likely wanted to build a huge store of dollars, that they no longer wanted to hold treasuries, they wanted to hold dollars. Most likely because they knew that with new sanctions went on, their companies, especially this was probably happening at the same time as Rusal, and they needed to get a bunch of dollars in order to stabilize the situation with Rusal. Most likely why that happened. I'll have to go back and make sure that the timeline is correct, but that seems right to me. Right? So there's that. So those two things. Now, do you think the EU, Washington conglomerates can keep Russia from reaching their potential? No. In the short answer, no. In the short run, yes. In the long run, no. Has China? I'm just fascinated by whenever RR's in the house, I learn shit. So that's cool. How much longer can the U.S. keep racking up debt? What's the breaking point? The breaking point will be after the European Union goes nuts. The reason is that because while the European Union is being drawn and quartered in its sovereign debt crisis, and while that's resolving itself, capital is going to flee to the United States. It's going to make it very easy for the U.S. to sell debt into those markets, especially as yields rise. Yields are going to continue rising. Okay, and central banks will generally sell in 25 basis point increments. As long as there's not a massive crisis, as long as everything kind of looks reasonable on the, is relatively stable. In times of relative instability, what will happen is you will see the central banks sell in 25 basis point movements on the 10 and the 30 year. Meaning you'll see those move up 3%, 3.25%, 3.5%, and every time they reach those 25 basis point milestones, those quarter point milestones, you'll see buying come in and push the prices back up again, and they'll come in and buy, and they'll use that, and they're basically what they're doing is they're selling into weakness. They're selling strength and buying weakness, selling strength and buying weakness, and if you look at the chart, that's what the yield looks like. It does that. It seems to be on the 25 point increment as long as there's no crisis. Well, all bets are off. We could see 50, 75, 100 basis point moves in a week. So don't, but for the most part, and as long as that regime is in place, there's no crisis. It can go on for a while. But the U.S. is going to continue racking up debt, but it needs to start racking up debt at a higher interest rate. Because, honestly, pension systems in this country, as Martin Armstrong keeps banging the table about, it's the pension systems that are all in serious trouble because they're all guaranteeing 8% returns and they're getting 2 and 3% in the bond markets. You can want all you want. Shit in one hand and wish in the other. See which one fills up first. Replying to my porn. Yes, every once in a while I do have to make a joke. All right, so Kim Jong-un is pulling a Bashar al-Assad by going to Russia. Un is coming to the U.S. for protection and going to them for protection instead of the U.S. Yeah. All you want. All right. Anything else? I'm okay with knocking off early tonight. We've been going for an hour. It's 10:15. I've got another World Cup match to download and watch, much to DTF's chagrin. Couldn't help it. What's my take on Tommy Robinson? Oh, dude, it's fucking horrible. And of course they're doing, and of course this is another one of those issues that's pushing that. I'm like, how dumb do you people think we are that we don't see what you're doing? You're going to push this on us? You're going to go to here now? You're going here now? It's going to be awful. The Fox Sports Pro app, you can download the games for free. You can download the games for free. You can't watch them live. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't know if is that available on Amazon. Of course, Kim is going to go to Russia. Russia is the ultimate neutral party in this. Now, as I said in the newsletter a couple of months back, never forget that the Koreans have been abused by the Chinese. Don't underestimate Korean antipathy towards both the Chinese and the Japanese, and that they've been used by both the Americans and the Chinese for a long time. Yes, the May government better hope that Tommy Robinson stays alive in jail, user 13. I agree with you completely. So it makes sense for Un to cozy up to the Russians, because the Russians again can be the guarantor of everybody. Like I've been positing about Syria and the Middle East, that Russia gets to be the guarantor of peace there. They can also be the guarantor of peace, again, through trade, through energy, basically through energy diplomacy and their proximity. It all works. The Russians can easily act as everybody's security blanket. Everybody's security mule is actually the better phrase. And I really like that idea, actually. Okay? User 13 tells the people on Periscope, if you're interested in Korean attitudes, you should look up the concept of Han. All right. Anything else before we go? Bueller, Fry, and yes, the Chinaman has everything to do with it. I wonder if the English will start hunting judges if Tommy Robinson dies. I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot cattle prod, dude. No way. No way. What do I think the impact of Mexico and Canada collapsing will be on the U.S.? The same as, well, not the same as Europe, because Europe will be purely financial. For us, it will be, there will be migration issues as well. I know that the DACA issues, I know the latest DACA poison pill stalking horse thing is a mess. So I hope to hell that Trump doesn't sign it, because if he does, he's in serious trouble. Considering the original plan is we would collapse under their pincer movement, and now we will be this. Yeah, that was the original plan, and now it's not going to work out that way. Well, you gotta remember that may have been their plan, but just because they have plans don't mean that those plans will come to fruition. We're talking about oligarchs and collectivists here. I know that they are immensely powerful, and I know that they act and that they still have immense power. But yeah, I saw that the border wall was technically approved. I didn't really follow it very carefully this afternoon, so I'll catch up on it later. With Paul Ryan approval, well, he's going to be gone soon anyway, so how much will it really matter? The base would, if he amnesties DACA, it's going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be bad. Again, because immigration is one of those things where it hits us right where we live. People are fundamentally hardwired to seek out people who are like them. I mean, look at this thing, right? Look at this community, right? Same thing. Our families, our communities, we seek out people who are like us, and we accept people who are unlike us as long as we can, over time, vet them, come to know them, get to understand them, and get to appreciate their value. But that is a long and laborious process. You don't wipe out racism overnight. You don't wipe out sexism or any of these isms overnight. You don't. And the idea that we can just do so by flooding the world with, by flooding communities with these people, and then wondering why people are getting angry about it, and then worse than that, then moralizing and demonizing them for being reactionary jerk-offs, is insanity. It's insanity. And it mostly comes from people frankly, from white middle-class liberals who live in freaking bedroom communities where there's not a black person or a Muslim to be seen. And it makes me sick. I know most of the people I know in Gainesville are like this. They all live in these lovely freaking communities with $250,000 houses, and and they don't live on the east side of town. I don't see them sending their kids to Lincoln High School. All bullshit. It all exists up here in their head. Well, theoretically, this is the way it should be. Well, yeah, as long as it happens to somebody else, it's fine. It's all NIMBY politics. It all sounds good as long as somebody else is getting fucked. They all want concrete, but nobody wants a concrete plant. It's the same shit every day. All right. I'm done. You guys have a good night. We'll talk soon. I'll be back on Monday nights. Probably will not be on this weekend. Maybe if something really crazy happens, I may be on Sunday morning. But I'm going to try and, I've got stuff I want to try and get written this weekend. That, I can get paid for. So, got to do that as opposed to everything else. Good to see everybody tonight. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.